Welcome. My name is David McElnay, and I'm representing the Executive Committee of the Urban Design Panel today. And very excited to introduce Bob Hastings and colleagues from TriMet to give us a great presentation on transit-oriented development. Just very briefly, the Urban Design Panel is sponsored jointly by the American Institute of Architects, the American Planning Association, and the American Society of Landscape Architects, and is composed of professionals from those organizations as a means of sharing interest in urban design. We are joined today by, well, actually Kurt Wilson. I'm not positive that he's on the call, but he's the Executive VP of AIA Oregon. AIA Oregon is currently hosting this Zoom meeting and previously hosted at the Center for Architecture in Portland. In addition to a monthly email announcement, our panel presentations can be found on that AIA Oregon event calendar, and as well as being announced on the Thursdays at 3 newsletter from AIA Oregon. So in participating today, you are now a panel member of the Urban Design Panel. And we encourage you to sign up for information for future presentations, through the outlets I just mentioned. When you register for this, either through an email announcement or through the AIA events calendar, you will be included. And in the emailing list, we also encourage you to send any interesting future panel presentation ideas to Adrian Morris at AIA Oregon. Those things will come up, that information will come up in the chat box as we go through the presentation. So these presentations are also recorded and made available by the AIA as a Vimeo file. We'll give you links to that in the chat box as well. For Q&A, please put your questions into the chat box. One of us from the executive committee will keep an eye on those and kind of curate a Q&A discussion after the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Bob Hastings, Agency Architect for TriMet, and say welcome. Bob, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, David. And I'll introduce myself and a little bit about the program, then I'll hand it over to my colleague, Benn, who will complete his introduction and then really launch into our presentation. So a little bit of context. I've been at TriMet for now over 20 years and have been in the role of agency architect, mostly delivering our light rail projects and managing design, both architecture, urban design, sustainability in that venue. And then 2 years ago, our general manager, at that time, our new general manager, Doug Kelsey, in a reorg of the agency, created a transit-oriented development program, kind of reprising something that had been part of TriMet's portfolio for going back several decades. And back in the day, G.B. Arrington and Phil Marquis and others, TriMet was part of that effort in the region to define what transit-oriented development could be for the region and how it could bring about mixed use and livable communities along our transit system, primarily focused again on our fixed route light rail corridors. In the end of the, or the opening up, I should say, of the Orange Line in 2015, our TOD efforts really sort of sunset. And we had been doing mostly through our real estate folks, trying to kind of release excess property, mostly through unsolicited proposals, but sometimes we actually put things out for requests for proposals, with the idea that it would kind of remove that as a deficit on our balance sheet. When Doug came on board, he kind of changed that viewpoint around and believed from his experiences working at TransLink up in Vancouver, BC, a community that we all have been studying for many years. And his experience at TransLink was to say, actually, property is an asset, and if handled correctly, appropriately, it can begin to provide benefits to the transit authority, both in terms of ridership increases, which obviously we're very keen on, but also being more in a proactive role to realize the opportunities and aspirations for development along in the TransLink station areas along their corridors. Vancouver and Portland, while similar, also very different. TransLink and TriMet also very different. But nevertheless, Doug brought that idea that TriMet should become more in a proactive role of helping to deliver the sort of promise inherent in developing our regional transportation network. And so he reprised this group, and I got traded from capital projects over into our legal division, went from being agency architect delivering light rail stations to helping to envision what could be developed at our station areas along the region. And coincidentally, we just this morning had a pre-proposal conference. Now, don't everybody go scurrying to their website right now to do station area planning and TOD planning for the Red Line extension from PDX Airport all the way to out into Hillsborough. Many faces and names. This is the second time I'm seeing you today because you're part of that earlier effort. So with now having a group within our legal department, myself as agency architect, Lance Ers as our head of real estate, what Doug recognized was that he really needed to have on this team somebody that had the direct experience of working on development, who understood the ways that commercial development could be both envisioned, but also to help deliver that. And after an international search, this is where Guy starts to blush. We were lucky enough to find that somebody had landed in Portland, specifically to be part of our region, to be part of the sort of promise for livability in the region. So about maybe 10 months ago, we brought Guy Benn on board to complete that sort of trifecta of expertise within our team. And we're going to share with you this morning or this afternoon that kind of arc of where we are now today, but what are the component parts that we envision our TOD program to this time around in this view, in this generation, move forward. So with that, I hand it over to my wonderful young colleague, Guy Benn.
Thank you, Bob. And yeah, Bob's right. I joined in February and spent a month in the office and then the last 9 months on Zoom. And I still haven't worked out how to turn it to monochrome so you can't see the blushes when he gives me an introduction. So we have a presentation which I'm just going to share now. And we'll run through it. Some of you have seen some of this material already. We'll run through the presentation pretty fast and aim to basically go through it in the next 25 minutes and then leave it open for questions. If there's anything burning, if you want to jump in halfway through, we're happy to do that as well. And hopefully we can have a engaging and constructive dialogue. To run through in terms of agenda, I'm going to quickly introduce myself, why TOD, what our TOD objectives are within TriMet, how we're approaching, trying to achieve those objectives, planning studies that Bob's already touched on a little bit, track record and current projects, and then obviously ways, how do we work with the urban design panel going forward, and open to any comments and suggestions there. So sort of the core part, the TOD team within TriMet, we're a small team. It's really, I've been very lucky to join, halfway through the sort of the inception of the team and sort of move forward from there. led by Lance Ers, who's Director of Real Estate and also Deputy General Counsel for TriMet. So he brings a legal element. Bob, has a storied history within TriMet and brings that design and architecture element. Myself, as Bob mentioned, I came from the East Coast. I'm a Brit. I moved to the US with my employer in 2008. I was working as a commercial broker and moved to New York, where I worked on commercial brokerage, both on existing income producing assets and also development sites. When the financial crisis hit in 2000, the Great Recession hit in 2008, I focused my efforts on working with international investors who were active in the US. So that took me to all the major urban markets across the US. And ultimately, I went and joined a client in 2016, a UK residential developer, and set up their US development arm. The group out of London is focused on co-living. It's a group called The Collective, and secured and funded their first 4 projects here in the US. I'm married, have two young children, and both my wife and I, sort of halfway through 2017-18, we decided that we were sort of, we were done with the East Coast grind. And so, we looked at options. She works in healthcare. She's, we're very fond of outdoor sports. And we were looking at a location where we could, with good employment opportunities, high quality of life, and ultimately fix upon Portland is a solution, and couldn't have been happier with our move. We've been here now for 2 years, and really a believer in what the area and the region offers to its residents. It has great employment opportunities, has a second to none transit network for an area of its size. And we feel that it's, from my personal perspective, when I was looking at sort of, my career prospects and not realizing that this job existed or would become available, I felt that, the Portland region is an area that has huge potential. And if anything, the horse hasn't really left the stable. The growth is still going to come, and yet the infrastructure is sort of keeping a pace with growth, which is a big part, with regards to this TOD program. With regards to the rest of the team, we work closely with community engagement and affairs, and I put Roberto's name here on the sort of core list. He splits his time between this and other commitments on the transit equity and advisory and community groups within TriMet. But we also work very closely with other divisions within the agency, whether that's with engineering and construction on project delivery, with other community affairs groups, service planning groups, etc. So we're a small team, but then we put in resources as needed. So why is TriMet promoting TOD projects? I know as design professionals, most of you will really get this. But we felt that we want to explicitly state it, and we see TriMet. Yes, it's a transit agency first and foremost, but we are also we serve the communities that our infrastructure touches, and we feel that transit projects don't simply exist in a vacuum, and that actually they have many other impacts to the surrounding communities that they pass through. And that, we as an organization ought to be cognizant of that and do what we can to promote those communities. And the benefits of TOD are pretty, are clear and well proven. They obviously, they have environmental impacts. It has impacts on, infrastructure cost savings, supports healthy lifestyles, provides mobility choices, and it strengthens, TOD strengthen transit systems and create value. And then we want to merge that with the delivery, the benefits of delivering mixed income neighborhoods, and put both those items together to create the maximum benefit we can for the community. In delivery of housing of all types. It obviously supports, it's a virtuous cycle where if you deliver TODs, it supports the transit system, it broadens access to opportunity, and it relieves gentrification pressures. And as a note here, and it's a personal sort of, one of my sort of key points that I often, we hear time and time again, is that, gentrification is considered to be a bad word. And, really one of the things that one of the messages that we're trying to promote is that gentrification isn't bad. We should be aiming to improve our communities. Where gentrification is bad is when it doesn't include all members of that community. And we're very focused on, our program has an equity bias towards it, and making sure that it doesn't negatively impact members of the community, and especially not those members of the community that most need support. So in order to sort of deliver this vision, the starting point, and I joined halfway through this effort, was Bob and Lance with input from the TriMet board and from a wide range of advocates and other stakeholders, drafted up some TOD guidelines. And these were first put in front of the board in October 2019. Where there was some strong discussion and comment about them. And so when I joined in February, we were working on basically updating those guidelines, taking account of all the comments that were received. And they were formally adopted by the board with a unanimous vote in May of this year. And those guidelines, it's a fairly lengthy and extensive document. It's available on our website, and we can share the link. We'll put it in the chat box in due course. But those guidelines really set out some key objectives, which are summarized on this slide. And they are, to promote equitable development and integrated communities. We are very much a believer that communities really exist and function best when they're mixed, with mixed income, mixed use, and they provide a diversity, and they provide a range of opportunities and a range of support and amenities to different groups. We want to promote public and private partnerships. We're a believer in mixing public and private creates entrepreneurial spirit, initiatives, and ideas. And we think that by mixing those two elements, you're going to get the maximum community benefit, be it in affordable housing or job employment opportunities or other amenity. Our program isn't simply about generating revenue or delivering housing, but we are looking at delivering, meeting wider community needs. And that includes access to transit, provision of amenities. And so when we're looking at a project, we look at the regional requirement, but we also look at the local need as well, trying to balance the needs of different stakeholders. And there's, a good example of this is that, some jurisdictions have, a large amount of affordable housing, and they're actually looking for revenue to support the services that they need to provide to their community. And so they're looking at market rate housing, whereas others, it can be on its head, for example. We want to mitigate and prevent any transit, what we've termed as transit displacement. Historically, with light rail projects and other large transit infrastructure projects, that gentrification has occurred, and the yellow interstate line is a good example of that. And we've learned that those projects, that benefit hasn't flown through to all members of the community. So we now, as a Southwest Corridor, which some faces here on this call I recognise, and we've worked together with, there was a strong emphasis on how do we prevent displacement as a result of this project, because the project will create increase in land values. There will be speculation around the alignment. There are going to be, rents are likely to increase as a result of that as prosperity comes into the region. So how do we make sure that it doesn't impact those that can least afford to be displaced from their residence or homes? And finally, and not least, is that our TOD objectives they need to provide resources and sufficient protection for us to continuing operating a viable and economic and functioning transit system. So we can't deliver TOD at the cost of our system, which is clearly an obvious goal. Okay, so challenges. There are multiple challenges to development, which I'm sure many of you're all familiar with, and we outlined them here. Really, we've highlighted the two most significant. That when we're looking at transit projects and new TODs, is it is essential that we deliver the project without causing any displacement. Because it's a self-defeating goal if we do that. And within that, we need to address preservation of housing. And it's not easy, it's, anyone that's familiar with development, the economics of development are extremely challenging. And how do you go about, delivering that without bringing the community benefit, but making sure that it flows through to all members of the community. So this slide really speaks to how are we going to go about achieving these objectives. We've already talked a little bit about creating partnerships with developers to deliver TODs. So I think one of the, TriMet, we like to plan and we want to plan, and it's hugely important, but really we just see the plans as the first step, and it's the catalyst to delivering developments on TriMet sites or other privately held sites that sit adjacent to our network. The one thing that TriMet is not, we're quite good at delivering transit projects, but we are not a developer. So we are looking to the development community, be it both public sector or non-profit or private developers, to come up with the ideas and to use the expertise to deliver these projects. We want to use our surplus land holdings to basically improve our network and deliver this TOD and deliver this benefit. And we're lucky as an agency not to have particularly stringent regulations that prevent us, for example, from only selling land at market value. We can sell land at a discounted basis if we can justify the community benefit that it will bring. We don't have a lot of financial tools that are available, and often our land has been acquired with FTA funds in terms of grants, so that unless we're looking at projects that meet certain criteria which allow us to basically write down the value of that FTA investment in the land. We will use non-financial subsidies wherever we can to promote TOD, transit-oriented development on TriMet land or on third-party owned sites. And simple, that can be simple things such as orientating our station designs and our TOD area designs so that they tie into the surrounding parcels, whether or not they be owned by TriMet or not, or providing transit trackers in lobbies. And our planning team is working constantly to sort of promote the simplest and the easiest way to install that type of technology into buildings. It requires a minimum physical infrastructure. We also are looking at the programs, a long-term program. So we are, for instance, we'll get onto this in a minute, but we're going to invest several $1 million into the infrastructure at Hollywood Transit Center, with a view to getting a return on our investment at a future date when we come to develop a second phase of that site. So we're looking at reinvesting capital and recycling capital from TOD projects. And in time, we're hoping to set up a TOD fund that will allow us to basically promote TODs to generate future revenue for future projects. And then we're going to leverage experience and relationships, and this is part of the reason for this call, that will promote, benefit, and help deliver projects across the region. And those experiences and those relationships exist across our organization at all levels. And we are very much, part of this call is to say that we're open for business. You as advisors and design professionals have a book of business and clients who own certain parcels and land, and we're always open if that individual owns property adjacent to TriMet infrastructure and wants to talk about promoting a TOD on that site. We are always open to having those conversations. Okay, so I'm just going to time check here. Okay. So what have we got as sort of our toolkit? I mentioned our TOD guidelines, and I won't really go through those in more detail. We have a TOD website which is up and running. It's trimet.org/TOD. The aim of that, and it will be built out as the program matures, is to deliver transparency on what our TOD program is and what its objectives are, provide details on projects, publish information on future opportunities, and act as a portal for stakeholder engagement. And then finally, we've spent a lot of work, and Bob mentioned this previously on, with the Red Line FTA pilot program, but on grants and incentives. And we're using whatever resources we can to plan station area plans or more regional wide some TOD assessment and other grant money to progress TOD. And those plans very much form the, really hopefully the catalyst to deliver developments at the station areas. To talk to those in more detail, I see Alex Dupé on the call. Alex has been working with us on an ODOT TGM grant, which we are waiting really for the release of funds now. That is going to be a region-wide planning effort on the TOD sites and lead to sort of the codification of our TOD guidelines and a formal TOD plan. Bob mentioned the Better Red station area planning work. This is an FTA pilot grant. The total grant amount is 700,000, but those of you on the RFP issue know that the sort of the scope is actually is a $500,000 grant, and that is now this is an out-of-date slide, but basically we the RFP is out and we're due to receive your proposals midway through next month, we hope. And then also we are working with Apano with support from Prosper Portland, and they've secured a grant through the Metro 2040 planning initiative to look at the 82nd Division station area, and it may extend a little bit beyond further into East Portland. I mean, the one thing I would highlight on these is that we aim to take a consistent approach, although these are all individual pieces of work, consistent approach to applying basically facts-based empirical analysis to this work, looking at a site-by-site approach, because you can't take account of all the members of the community without, if you take a broader regional view. There's always going to be an element of stakeholder engagement. And we remain fully committed to equity, innovation, transparency, and flexibility. This slide sets out in sort of more diagrammatic fashion the scope of the different grant initiatives that we have going. So the blue circle is the region-wide ODOT TGM grant. The red circles show the station areas that fall within the FTA Red Line planning grant, and obviously the green 82nd and Division Apano work is marked on the map as well. Another element that many of you are familiar with as well is despite the unfortunate and sad no vote on the Get Moving 2020 measure in the election, TriMet and Bob, myself, and the rest of the team, working with the City of Portland, working with Tigard, spent a lot of time looking at the Southwest Corridor alignment and how do we maximize the TOD opportunities that exist upon it. And this ties into some of our earlier comments about how the transit project isn't simply just a transit project and how it impacts the communities. And one of the requirements, or one of the sort of initiatives that came out of the Southwest Corridor project, was the creation of a memorandum of understanding with all the community and the jurisdictional partners about how much affordable housing needed to be delivered in order to prevent displacement should the project be built. And the TOD work that we were doing related to both providing the affordable housing to meet that MOU requirement, and also looking at how do you maximize the benefit? How do you're delivering a world-class project that will link Bridgeport with the city of Portland? How do you ensure that the maximum economic development, the maximum job opportunities, the maximum access is provided by the project? And I would cite that we had a charter with the city of Tiger that was a huge success. It went from fairly sort of, I would say it was a testy relationship at the start of the conversation, and some really fantastic TOD ideas came out of it as a result. And that was a lot in part due to the consultants like yourselves providing some innovative and great solutions that hopefully, if we can find a way to fund this project through other means, will be delivered in due course. Track record. We've probably got a couple, probably about 4 or 5 more slides left, and then we'll open for questions. But track record, to date, in the past 5 years with sort of projects, and this slide is also out of date, I'm afraid, but we've delivered 718 housing units. With about 66% of those have been affordable, and that's adopting HUD guidelines for affordability, i.e. 60% AMI or less. This is pipeline affordable housing units of 115 plus. That's actually closer to 215 now. And we're continuing to work on projects across the region. Within our TOD guidelines, those of you that sort of partook in that or followed that engagement and those conversations, TriMet made a commitment to a 30% threshold, minimum threshold of affordable housing units out of all residential projects it delivered through TOD. Now, that is relatively low compared to our track record, but what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to discourage private developers from competing on projects. And the reality is that in today's environment, we see there's a greater ability to deliver affordable housing, and there's more financing available for affordable housing delivery than there is market rate. But that will change over time, and we don't want to be stuck in a situation where we've got developers ready to move forward and we can't execute on a project because our guidelines don't provide for it. We recognize there's a need for all types of housing, and we're particularly interested in catering to middle income, and by that I would say 60 to 120%, and identifying ways on how do we deliver not just an affordable housing project or a middle income project or a luxury project, but how do we deliver a project that mixes all three, and ideally mixes all three into a single building. So we want to have flexibility and latitude within the program. Just to wrap up with some case studies, some of you may be familiar with these. This is a project, this is a great project down just north of Clackamas Town Centre off Fuller Road on the Green Line. We were approached by a private developer called Geller Silvis Associates, who have done a number of affordable housing projects in Clackamas. They want to do a new project, and they came to us and said, listen, you've got a park and ride site at Fuller Road. It's very low. It's not intensively utilized. We'd like to acquire about 1/3 of the site, about 40% of the site for an affordable housing building. And we worked with the developer and with Clackamas, and we came to a solution where they're developing a 6-story, 100-unit, 100% affordable building. And I'll get to the next slide. It's not here. the interesting part to this project is that we agreed a land price. We then determined that Clackamas wanted the building to front Fuller Road, which basically meant it sat on top of an existing stormwater facility that TriMet has that serves the park and ride. So we worked with the developer and with Clackamas County and with the FTA, and ultimately agreed to reduce the land value, which would allow for the relocation of that stormwater facility to a new site off-site. And it kept the project viable from the developer's approach. And this project also delivers a new street that will connect the light rail station with Fuller Road that runs to the south of the site and at the southern fringe of our park and ride. TriMet's going to dedicate that land to Clackamas. And the motivation here for us is that even though we're selling this land at a discount, and really we're taking really zero profit. We are taking zero profit from the transaction. It unlocks two significant sites to the south, including one which is the Miller fiberglass site, which is owned by Clackamas County and already identified for significant residential development. So as you can see, by just doing this sort of, I would say that this is a nil, the sort of zero-sum game project for TriMet. We're actually going to generate a lot more ridership and also community benefit for the neighborhood through the delivery of that street. And Clackamas and the developer have done an amazing job to get it. We're scheduled to be closing this. It's all fully funded in January next year. The second case study that we'll refer you to and then open up for questions is the Hollywood Transit Center. This is a really good news story, and we literally last night got approval internally for bond financing to deliver the infrastructure on this project, which is about over $5 million worth of costs that TriMet will put into the site to promote this project. What is planned here, working with Bridge Housing, we ran a marketing process using CBRE, using Cushman and Wakefield on this site, selecting full open marketing, selected a joint venture between Bridge and a market rate housing developer. And then when the financial crisis hit, the market rate financing fell apart. So we moved forward just with the affordable project as phase one. And I will take you to the next screen just to show you the project in plan view. No development is simple. One of the items that came out during this sort of pre-development phase was the existence of a HUD DDA boundary, so a disadvantaged development area boundary. And effectively, to the west of this boundary, your tax credits are viable for affordable housing development. And if you move east of it, which is to the left on your screen here, it becomes significantly harder. So we have a limited building footprint. Working with Bridge, we have been sort of going through the pre-development process, and ultimately, when we established that there's some car parking was needed, and we have about 40 spaces for 213 units, so that's a very low ratio per unit. And that includes the use of stackers. We established it actually building a taller, denser building of 13 stories with 213 units is a more viable and the right approach to take with this site, which meets TriMet's objectives to deliver density. It's delivering an improved public realm. What will happen at Hollywood is that, for those of you familiar with the transit station, the transit center at the moment, the buses currently pull in, and it's really not a very intensively used, it's certainly not highest and best use for the site. Work with the City of Portland to vacate the portion of Northeast 42nd Avenue between Halsey Street and the I-84 bridge, and turn this into a public paseo and a courtyard. And then you can see outlined is the phase 2 site here, which we'll be working probably with community organization to program and activate. And then ultimately, in due course, probably once this building is built, look to find a developer that wants to do a project on this site. There's a link to the website at the bottom of the slide here. And as you can see, we are now, we're pushing forward with a view to aiming construction start on the site, having secured all the financing permitting in mid to late 2023. So that's it in a nutshell. Hopefully I haven't run too far over time, and happy to, Bob and I are very happy to answer any questions or take any comments.
Well, Guy, thank you. You're right on schedule. I can see why Bob had you present. It's nice to hear a UK accent. I think, Bob, in the future, if you can have a UK accent, your comments will be very well respected. We're starting to have questions kind of come into the chat box, but one thing that the executive group wanted to talk about, we talked about if you're a APA member, American Planning Association, this is the cover and story about transit and crisis. I know we're looking at long-term issues, long-term planning, but is there any lessons learned for the last 9 months that are going to probably affect your long-range planning, some of the projects you're doing?
Well, yeah, probably the overarching one is the perception and the reality, because they come together, of safety and security, both in terms of the individual, the pandemic, but also through social justice and other activities that have really come to fore. So it's how do we, that's the question we're asking ourselves, how do we ensure that the broad breadth of our community and our neighborhoods literally have that experience where they feel safe and they are welcome and feel inclusive. Those are big issues. And so our community engagement process, especially with the Hollywood Transit Center, I mean, we're leading in with that at the get-go, rather than sort of coming up with a design proposal and then vetting it with the community. They've already been involved with us, and having that partnership with Bridge has been really extraordinary. We're using Hollywood as an example. It also relates to one of the other questions in the chat about spaces as well as places. So we're taking 42nd Avenue, which is a City of Portland right-of-way, and that's going to have a street vacation activity, which will both give us the FAR that we need for the development, but also put the ownership back onto TriMet, and in a cooperation with the developer, how to manage and activate that space. So rather than sort of no man's land, it becomes that shared space that by its activities and by the eyes on the place begin to address the safety and security quotients to that. None of this yet is sort of spelled out. We're advancing on this with everybody's good intentions, as well as folks' very harsh judgments about things, and we have to listen to both sides of that to get the full reality of what's going to move forward. But I guess the summary point about this is that we as a transit authority have been doing our light rail projects for decades now, and we've really learned and built some muscle and expertise in ground truthing what our aspirations are with what is the reality, and not being shy about facing those hard questions and trying to figure out with that community engagement what is the best way to move forward.
Yeah, messaging, sorry. I was going to say messaging is absolutely paramount, and being able to convey our message and our intentions. And from what I've seen is, and we had our feet held to the fire with our guidelines, and it was a really good exercise for us to learn how important it was to communicate with advocates, with members of the community. And this absolute transparency as to what we're doing and why we're trying to do it and how we're going to achieve it is essential. I think, and being clear, it's difficult, and I think lessons learned. I would say, Southwest Corridor, part of the, I have a biased opinion on that project, but I think one of the problems that the ballot measure had is that it just got lost in too many other items. And we have to be really focused part of the effort that's going into planning is very much along, and I said it several times, is not just because we want to plan, it's because that will give developers and stakeholders the clarity as to what we want to do, and allow that to be delivered. Because if we're not focused enough, and even if it's like, I believe in winning by increments. So Hollywood is a massive step forward for us and for the region, because it's going to be a flagship exemplar project that's going to show what we can do and how good we can do it. And we want to, it's going to take time to build up the momentum, but we, get it right, get it done, move on to the next one.
Following up on your point that TriMet's not just a transit agency, but in some ways a placemaking, one of the questions is, what role does TriMet see open space playing in the TODs?
Yeah, really good one. Should I start, Bob? That weighs into, we're very specific within our guidelines, and which why it's sort of a fairly heavy document in terms of looking at, if we dedicate our parcels to open space, how does that unlock TOD in the neighborhood? So there's this ability to dispose of or transact land so that it brings community benefit, and write down the value of that land so that we don't is part of the it's essential. We believe in density, but at the same time we want to see open space so that it offsets that density and it creates that correct environment. So in each station area, that's where the community engagement comes in within each station area, and we look at, yes, we have certain goals to deliver as much density and affordable housing or mix of uses as we can, but it has to be sort of within the bounds of what's appropriate for the micro location, if that makes sense.
Great. Another question is, do you have a plan for intermunicipal cooperation for pre-development and design? Are you considering a forum? Can the urban design panel assist?
Well, you just revealed the real purpose of our showing up into your party, and that is to steal your food and drink and continue on with you guys. Yeah. Short answer is not yet. And one of the precedents that we looked at around the country was in the Bay Area, where BART has been providing their transit service for years. And recently, it was recognition that station area planning was not happening. There was a lot of NIMBYism. There was also a lot of concern about a variety of local communities. And what shockingly passed at the California legislature was the authority to give BART a kind of super agency authority over local jurisdictions, meaning BART could say, well, this is our property, here's what we want to do, forget what your jurisdictional regulations are relative to parking and height and other uses, we want to move forward with that. So that's a pretty bludgeoning hammer to use. BART, to their credit, said, let's put that behind our back. Now, is there anybody here in the Bay Area that would like to start working with us to unlock what could happen of a greater outcome? And sure enough, now you have the folks who are willing to lean into that. And I think that's the lesson we took away from that. And by doing this station area planning work, both on the Red Line as well, Southwest Corridor, and through the ODOT TGM grant, we're having to sort of test our goals and objectives with the local jurisdictions. And several of you, we've had these conversations, and I'll see that Ben and Don are on the call too, and they'll recount that several years ago they had a wonderful proposal that came through the city of Hillsborough for our park and ride at Willow Creek, and that was the first time that they sort of met Doug Kelsey and learned that we weren't willing to sort of come to a normal market rate subscription for that development. We wanted to see if we could unlock a larger value out of that. Well, when we went to the city of Hillsborough and explained that this is why we're not pursuing the development, city of Hillsborough said, well, what are you talking about? This is a great project. We support this. We need to, Washington County, they need affordable housing too. And then we explained what it is that we are interested in doing. And you can see their eyes kind of opening up as a jurisdictional partner. And they said, oh my God, you're right. There is a limited resource that we have. And as Washington County is starting to fill in and develop, we should be participating in what is that greater value capture and what is the greater benefits by tweaking the restrictions and opportunities that we have, the entitlements at the site. That led us into now this conversation we're having with them. But I think one of the things I've experienced and guys been seeing this happening too, we need help in articulating and illustrating and visualizing what could be, what is the potential for these places throughout the region. And it's not just what the market rate is delivering today, it's what it could deliver into the future. And having folks both to work with us, to challenge us, to correct us, but also to be an advocate in the broader community is a huge resource and an opportunity. So yeah, there's this chance for some really nice synergy of what we want to do and what I think interests the urban design panel. And again, this convergence of our three design institutions coming together.
And I'd add, Alex Dupé is going to be part of this, and part of the ODOT, TGM grant is trying to look at some development typologies that are sort of can be applied across the region. The reality is, and as Bob said, is that we're not going to get anywhere if we use a hammer and we're sort of in an adversarial fashion and try and enforce it on the local jurisdictions or the local community. So it has to be done in a sympathetic way and with their input and support. But if we can expedite, and make it simpler and more uniform for, developers, because they, like us, are active across multiple jurisdictions, then that's going to help, and that's going to help deliver this stuff, and it's going to expedite the delivery of this. And we again, it's to us, it's part of it is let's get it right to start with, and we will take a bit of time to build up, but hopefully we can expedite the process. And we took a site back not too long ago, which we weren't anticipating to take hold of, and so we never know really what's going to be in our portfolio. And from where I stand is like, if we've got a site and it's ready for development and someone's prepared to do it and it's the right thing to do for that site and for the community, then we're going to push it forward.
So speaking of the hammer, another question, do you feel the city, I assume the city of Portland, is working with your ideas in terms of development corridors and parking requirement reductions?
So an example,
yeah.
And I'll lead into the red line work. Both Guy and I, through different sort of avenues with the city, are looking at our park rows, park and ride. This is delivered as part of the Red Line project. It's in an area of the city, quite frankly, that's been woefully underserved relative to the opportunities for development. It so many needs that it has in terms of affordability and jobs and all that kind of stuff. So ODOT, TriMet, Prosper Portland, Bureau of Planning, Housing Bureau, this is where we can utilize our site to sort of dig into some of these issues through this planning process and, kind of crunch the numbers and referencing again the work that several of you have done. It's not just the visualizations, it's also what are the impediments from a marketing or from a financing standpoint, but also what is the opportunities for it to deliver economic opportunity, and not in a gentrified only way, but in a broader sense. How do we calculate that? How do we measure that? How do we see what those adjustments might reveal in terms of outcomes, beyond just what the developer would do as kind of the normal thing? And one of the tenets that Guy has brought to my awareness is, once you identify what the risks are and how you can achieve those outcomes with these other adjustments, those entitlements, you've helped reduce down all those unknowns, and now a developer can come into the project with a greater assurance that there is a path forward to victory and to achieving something, because that's what they don't want to be spending their money to try and unlock these things, which is why they tend to sort of stay, in the lane that they do their work.
Well, it's coming up on the top of the hour. No other questions. Unless there's any other thing, I think I'll take it upon myself to thank Guy and Bob. Bob, keep working on that accent.
Good day.
Bob, could I
That's
have one moment?
Yes.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, yeah, for the panel, I really appreciate this conversation, but I wanted to take just 1 minute, and I wanted to just, for this group, really recognize Bob Hastings and his decades-long contribution to this evolution of a narrative that's really weaving transit, urban design, and development together in a really fundamental way. When I started at TriMet, Bob was already very well established in this area, and really working in front of the scenes and behind the scenes to get people to understand that delivering projects is not going to lead to success. We need to create better habitat for humans, and that transit was a way to do that, but it would not do it by itself. And the contribution he's made at elevating urban design discussion and really leading, cajoling, embarrassing, and encouraging this transit agency to take a step to being even more explicit than we have been about TOD is really, really notable. And I just wanted to take this moment to make sure everybody, I think many folks are aware of Bob and his contribution, and certainly no discredit to Guy at all, but I really wanted to take a moment to recognize Bob and what he's done in his career.
Agreed. Thank you, Sean.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very
Now
good.
he's blushing. Good. Revenge.
Thank you. Hey, and well, I know we got to run, everyone. David McElnay, I'm on the executive committee for the urban design panel. I know that we as a group are very interested in potentially being a forum to place that in. I'm going to take one step back and say, and as representing urban design city of Hillsborough, that the folks on this Zoom call get the concept of urban design equals value, and know that that's a very complex forum to try to make it happen in, right? So maybe our best strengths are making complexity seem simple. But my point is that in the municipal governments, there's lots of us who know that and are working very hard to kind of coordinate, say, between Washington County, TriMet, the city of Hillsborough, all consultants, all these great people, but not necessarily leadership. And that's not a diss on city management or city councils or anything like that. They're not urban design folks. So how we walk the message up is going to be equally as important as the message, for example, on the red line extension thing, where in my part, I'll be involved in multiple touch points with you, but not necessarily at the 4 levels up the stack. And so that will be very important to me, Bob, that either we support a forum that the whole region the whole urban growth boundary can be looking in at the same time, or, individually by municipalities, et cetera. So just want to make sure that was a direct bump before we say goodbye.
And before we go by, everyone has our 1 o'clock Zoom meeting, our next Zoom meetings. If any of the people attending the meeting, this webinar, are interested in other topics for the upcoming year, just send an email to us through the Adrian which is on the link in the chat. We're looking at other topics. It's pretty clear that we're going to be Zooming for a while. And it's even after all this is over, it's a great way of reaching out to both people who can't always make it down to the Center for Architecture. So go ahead and if you got topics or anything else, please inform us so we can add that to the list. Anything else, David?
All good. Thank you everyone so much for being here. So far, we're 45 participants today. We hope to keep building that. I saw a lot of new faces today. Shout out to Dave Adi. I see him in there. We'll have something really great coming back in January, and look for the announcements. Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.